So good morning, everybody, and welcome to another conversation hosted by Heart Community Group. And this time I'm delighted to welcome Meghan from The Week. And I first came across The Week not that long ago, actually, about 3 months or so. And I know you're the lead, Meghan, for the UK in terms of community engagement. So Meghan is going to share a short presentation with us, and then we'll get a chance to ask questions. So fantastic. Over to you, Meghan.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Kim, thank you so much for reaching out to me as well. Hello. It's great to meet everyone, and I really appreciate being asked to come here today, and hopefully we can talk about some really interesting aspects of how we each in different ways tackle the climate crisis, and I'll be able to give a bit more information on The Week. I know that we're all probably slideshow and presentationed out of our minds, so I'm going to try and not do a super long presentation, but what I thought it would be really useful to do is give a quick overview of The Week, but also just dive a little bit into a bit about our strategy and why it is that we do what we do. And then afterwards, what we could do is have some conversation and questions, and I can go into a bit more detail. So I apologize in advance for showing you yet another presentation, but hopefully it's not too boring. If I can get a thumbs up, please, if you can see my screen. Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah. So as Kim introduced me, I'm Meghan, or Meg. I am the UK activation lead for the new climate mobilisation project, The Week. So I'm in charge of a few different things within the UK. Part of it is the kind of community building. Part of it is building up an ecosystem of partners and allies who all of us in various ways are working to tackle the climate crisis. And I'm the only person in the UK, so it's just me, myself and I here. I'll talk a little bit more about where we have other activation leads as well when I talk a little bit about our strategy. But The Week, I'm not sure how many other people have heard of The Week. If I can get a wee thumbs up or a show of hands if you've heard of us before.
I read it every week.
I know, we're always competing for what comes up first on Google. Okay, so not many of you have heard of The Week. That is totally fine, because we are a really pretty new organisation. So I thought I'd start by setting a little bit of the context about why it is that we've kind of started doing what we're doing. So I think a lot of us know this already, so I know that I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but when we have really great climate policies and we have really great climate technology, it's not enough to actually avert the climate crisis. What we need to reach is a social tipping point where we have millions of us, not just in the UK, but around the world, that are awake and alive to the urgency of what's happening and what's to come. And they want to kind of activate themselves from the inside. So whether that's in their community, put pressure on politicians, changing how we consume, how we change our workplaces, etc. So The Week has been designed to kind of help create those social tipping points. So we have a really specific strategy, and we'll go in a little bit more to what we mean by the broad middle, but we want to mobilise the broad middle. So that's the vast majority of the population who know that there is a climate crisis, they're aware it exists, they're maybe quite concerned and alarmed by it, but they've actually not yet got deeply active in the movement itself. And I think a lot of us have maybe had this challenge as well, that talking about the environment can be overwhelming. It can sometimes feel quite polarizing as well, to have these really important conversations about changing habits or lifestyles, changing politicians' minds, changing hearts and minds of friends and family. And often we find ourselves that we're in almost our own bubble. So preaching outside the choir, so talking to people that might not be necessarily as involved in the movement, can sometimes be quite difficult, and having those conversations that spark the change that's needed. So The Week is something that's been built to do something about that, and we aim to inspire action through emotional processing and having norm shifting conversations. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Just to dive in a little bit about the broad middle, I'm so sorry if I'm kind of repeating something that you're all very, very aware of. What we're not aiming to do is reach out and change the minds of climate skeptics or climate deniers. We do want to engage with and work with and empower the small percentage of people who are already deeply activated, and I'm sure some of you are those people, or many of you are those people. So this is a tool that people can use who are already deeply activated to reach out to the broad middle. So like I said, people who are concerned, are alarmed, but are yet to get active. So we have a really specific remit that's who we want to reach. And we are aware that for us to reach the tipping point that we need within the climate crisis and tackling it, we need the broad middle to come over to the kind of more active, and we need that small percentage become a bigger percentage and a bigger percentage. So we have 4 key strands, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the experience and what it is. We have 4 key strands within the week. So we have the week at work, the week at campus, the week at faith, and the week at home. I know it doesn't make too much sense now if you've never come across the week, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about what our strands are and why they're relevant in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'll talk a little bit more about the experience. So, you know, we have this specific remit. We're wanting to reach out to the broad middle. We want to inspire and encourage emotional processing and norm shifting conversations. So what is it that we're actually doing? So what I've got is I've got a short video that kind of sums up the week, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of the strands as we talk about it. So I should have my sound shared, but please do interrupt me if it's not shared properly.
Hi, my name is Helen.
And I'm Frederick.
And with a group of friends, we've created this thing called The Week to really look into what's happening when it comes to the climate and the environment.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Week!
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue dans The Week.
Hi, and welcome to The Week.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Glad you're here.
My name is Frank Johnson.
My name's Ashley McClure.
John and Holly Arbuckle at Singing Pastors Farm.
My name is Yancey, and I'm really glad that you're here.
So in practice, we invite you to meet 3 times over the course of a week, hence the name The Week. Each time we'll share a 1-hour documentary film with you and then suggest a conversation you can have in your group for 30 or 45 minutes to explore together what you could make of this all.
It's a journey shaped kind of like you. Episode and we will dare to look at the reality of what's coming. It's hard, but it can also be a relief, right, we no longer need to try and tune out the bad news.
With episode 2, we'll go a level deeper to understand how did we get here and is there a way out?
With episode 3, we move up the U again, and it's all about us, you, me, and what we can do, very concretely, and how rolling up our sleeves can actually bring us lots of joy and meaning.
At first, we shared this on video calls with some friends during the pandemic.
Hi, I'm Milan.
And they found it so powerful and important that they kept sharing the recordings with their own friends and colleagues. We decided, let's turn this into films.
Everyone tells us that it's a pretty unique experience, one that will stay with them for quite some time. If this sounds intriguing, it's actually quite simple. You can invite some friends or colleagues, you choose 3 dates, and off you go.
Yeah, so we can't wait to share this with you.
I have managed to unshare my screen rather than stopping the video. 2 seconds while I share it again. So I hope that's given you a wee bit more of an overview about the week as a project and an organisation, but what I thought would be really useful.
We face a terrible apathy crisis.
Give me 1 second. Just like YouTube, I forgot that it changes and goes on to different videos, so I've just loaded up another video by accident. Okay, so the U-shaped journey that you saw coming up when we talked about the week. What's really exciting is Elaine, who you met in that video. She is actually a grief counsellor. So a lot of what the week is and how we go through the week and that emotional processing is based on the concept of going through grief and coming out the other side with a sense of hope and a sense of community. So we have 3 episodes that you watch over the course of a week. So hence the name of the week. So we pretty much are what we say we do in the tin. So each time you get together, and it's around 90 minutes that you have together, you have a 1-hour documentary, and then you have a 30-minute guided conversation that we kind of set up for you. So one of the great things about the week is no facilitator is needed. So everything that you need sits on the videos that we kind of provide for you. So when we look at episode 1, and when you first get together with your group of friends, family, colleagues, whatever it is, we look at kind of the reality of what we're about to face. So many of us, particularly when we're saying the broad middle, we know that the climate crisis exists. We know it's something that we should be worried about, but we're not quite ready to face those facts. And it can feel really terrifying to actually open up and say, well, this is actually what's going to happen to us in reality if we don't do something about it. So this creates a safe space to have those courageous conversations, but also to open up and explore what is actually going to happen to me and you and people we love in the next 20, 30, 40 years if we keep going in the trajectory that we're going. So it's the idea of processing the grief of what's happening with the climate crisis in episode 1. And then you have space to have a 30-minute conversation. Episode 2, when you meet again throughout the week, it's kind of providing that bit of clarity. So, you know, this is what's going to happen, but actually, how did we get here? Like, what's the story that's kind of brought us to this moment? But also, what's the new story that we can bring out of this that can actually create a difference? Because it can feel really kind of scary and overwhelming thinking, well, all of this is happening, it's happening really quickly, but what needs to change in order for us to see like a new and exciting and adventurous story coming out? So it's providing that sort of sense of hope as well as some clarity. And episode 3 is where we kind of come back up that U-shape and come out with a sense of hope and action. So it's providing that sort of inspiration and the energy. So thinking about like, what can I do? What can we do? What could we join? What networks could we be part of? Is there something we can do at home? Is there something that we can do in work? And also, how do we turn something that's a real defining crisis of our generation and our lifetime into something that's a real adventure, and it can be fun and it can be exciting and it can really bring you a lot of hope and a sense of community. So it's about changing from that sort of fear and apathy into a really exciting new story that we can create together. So when I talk about the conversations, the videos are great and they really bring a lot of emotions and a lot to the table, but that's not what the power of the week is. The conversations are really where the magic truly happens. So like I say, we set up the conversation for you, and I said I would come back to logic behind the madness of the week at home, work, campus and faith. So we focus on these 4 strands, but because we focus on these 4 strands, what we do is we tailor the conversation starters to whichever context you're in. So if you're sitting having a conversation with your colleagues, it's likely going to be slightly different to if you're sitting in your congregation having a conversation, or if you're sitting with your mum and dad at home and having a chat with them. So each of those conversations are tailored to the context. And like I said, because you don't need a facilitator, you can kind of just sit back and get started. Normally it's around 30 to 60 minutes, the conversation, but we recommend around 30, but we see that a lot of groups tend to have a bit longer in a conversation as well. For a lot of people, it's the first time that they've really sat down and engaged in a really deep and meaningful way with their friends or their colleagues or their family about the climate crisis. So again, you've read the news articles, you know it exists, but have you actually sat down and taken the time to process it and have these conversations? So we found when we hear feedback that there's a lot of emotion that's shared, but also a lot of hope and joy that's shared as well. And also it's kind of normalizing those conversations as well, because you're having them in so many different places, whether that's at work or at home or in your faith network, or whether you're on campus with students. And it's okay to be really concerned and find it really alarming, but it's okay to be excited about all the actions that we can take together to create this tipping point that we need in our society. So it's about having those really norm shifting conversations. And this is really where we see a lot of the magic gets sprinkled around people who go through the week. So when I said, had you heard of the week before, and not a lot of you had, part of it is because we are very, very new. So we've only launched in January of this year. We did a lot of research over the last couple of years. We did the films, we ran prototypes, but the week as it is has launched in January of this year. And since then, we've had more than 1,200 groups go through the experience, which is equated to more than 10,000 participants, which is really exciting considering we're only a few months in. As a UK lead, I'm actually, we're only relatively new and actively UK. So I've been here since May. So we're now at that point where we're kind of starting to see people picking up in the UK and getting excited about having these conversations. So at the moment, we're mostly seeing conversations happening in France, followed by Germany, Belgium, the USA, Switzerland, and the UK. We do have a bit of a strategy behind this. In our movies, we focus predominantly on the USA and Europe as examples of what's going to happen in the USA and Europe in the next 20 to 30 years if we don't stop going in the trajectory we're going in. Big part of that is that we simply didn't have the lived experience to talk about other places, and we didn't think that we had the authority to speak on behalf of anyone. So we kind of see that the conversations are being had predominantly in the countries that we focus on in the films. When we say we have activation leads like myself who are focused on community building, we focus on just a few key countries at the moment. We are a tiny team. We are a global team of 8 so far. So we focus on the USA. We have an activation lead in France. We have an activation lead in Germany, and we have 2 people that kind of co-lead that sort of global activation. How do we strategically build these tipping points in all these different countries around the world? So we are being quite strategic about where we focus our energies on. I just thought it'd be quite fun to show you some photos that we've been sent in the past of some people who have taken part in the week. So the great thing about the week is it can be done online and it can be done in person. It can be set up however you want. So we have people that can watch the films inside and sit outside and have a conversation, people that are doing it in the workplace just on Zoom, people that are meeting in community centres or in spaces of worship, people that are sitting at home and just having these really empowering conversations. So it's really great because it can happen, and this magic can happen in so many different places and spaces. And what I thought I could do is just share how, if this is something that you'd be really excited to try, and use the week as a chance to have powerful conversations with your broad, middle and your networks. Some things that you could do is literally anyone can organise a session. No facilitator is needed. Everything that you need sits on our website, including our films. You literally just register, tell us how many people you want to organise a session with, and off you go. We send absolutely everything out to you, including template invites that you might want to use if you want to send emails to invite out people. So you can literally just get started. The one thing that we would say is, because of the emotional processing side of things, we do recommend that it's for anyone over the age of 16, just because there's quite a lot to kind of go through and process. So we wouldn't necessarily recommend that you sit down with your 10-year-old and have this conversation, or take it into primary or high schools, unless it's 16 and above. You could also tell your friends and family about the week and help more people have these courageous conversations to then join the movement that's taken us closer towards those social tipping points. And if you have a specific network, whether you're a professor on campus, or whether you are part of a congregation, or you are part of a network within your workplace, you can think about how you might want to spread the week within your own network and have those conversations with a goal of achieving those tipping points. So I'm very aware that I've spent 22 minutes talking at you with slides, and I know that we don't want to just have my voice talking. So I'm going to end with that. Thank you again for inviting me here. I hope that this has been informative and it's given you a bit of a flavour about what we do, but I'm really happy to dig in and answer any more questions that you've got.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Megan. Brilliant. And thank you for everything that you do and have been doing. And in fact, my first question was, how did you get involved with this? What's a little bit about your journey? Yeah, so I come from NGO land. So I've worked predominantly with large, often multinational charities almost all my life, or all my professional life.
So I've worked for big organisations like the British Red Cross, Oxfam, more recently with an organisation called Shelter, which is in housing and homelessness. My specialty is campaigns, activism and community organising. So thinking about how do you build a movement within either a really small specific network, or how do you make this a big, exciting, fun campaign? I have a background in working on refugee rights, climate campaigning, and also housing justice as well. So those are kind of my three specialty backgrounds. My passion is movement building, and I think this is really exciting, and mass mobilisation. I had found out about the week through another organisation, and I was like, wow, this is exactly where we need to be. These are the kind of conversations we need to be having. For me, one of the things that I think is just so important in any conversation that we have, no matter what movement that we want to be part of, who we're trying to mobilise, is that it's so easy to get caught up in your own confirmation bias. And I think that I'm guilty of this. On my Facebook, all the groups that I follow all have the same beliefs and kind of points to make and their movements, and coming out of that and having those conversations with people that haven't had those conversations before, that's where the magic happens, and that's where change happens. And for me, I think it's just so exciting that we get to have this little piece that we can provide to help these conversations be had within the climate movement, and to help more people kind of come in, moving from that broad middle to being much more actively and deeply engaged.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer that, you know, like the movie, we need everything everywhere all at once now. And you'll have come across the Climate Majority Project. I know they've been talking with you, and a few of us on this call have been quite involved in that for the last year or so as well, which has a similar kind of focus, very much the majority who, as you say, are engaged and sorry, not engaged, but concerned. And yeah, so brilliant. I'm going to throw it open now. Who else has a question for Meghan? Yeah, Cecilia.
Unmute. Yeah, hi Meghan. That was brilliant, and dare I say it, I feel quite hopeful, because I really have found it hard to engage people, and at the moment I'm a big part of a Christian Catholic climate thing where I'm trying to engage people, but actually most of my friends and community are not Christian, and it's actually just sort of alienates them really. So this would be a brilliant tool to use with just about everybody, I think. But my question is, how in just a couple of lines, how would you introduce it to people to draw them in before because people immediately say, oh, you know, no, or I'm not, you know, they immediately think you're going to be, it's something radical, you know. How do you just talk to people about it, first of all, in just a couple of lines about what it is, so that you're not asking them to do anything that might, you know, be radical, or even, you know, you're going to try to take them somewhere that's quite a difficult place to go. How do you get them to go there, you know? Because I find that people, I showed a film in my church, and the reaction was grief and everything, but then the following week when I tried to follow through, everybody was like this, keep away from me sort of thing. So how do I sort of enter into it, and what sort of wording would you use? Because I think the wording is really important, and just, you know, just for the initial conversation to get them to join, because I love the logo with the arrow going down, but then it comes up again. That's really great. So you know that you're going to be, you know, it's going to be difficult. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. And you know, that is the difficult part of preaching outside the choir, so to speak. You know, how do you make it something that's fun and exciting and accessible, when for so many people it's, you know, the fear of the guilt, the fear of what's coming, you know, like you say, the grief, and then shutting off and saying, I don't want to feel like that again. I don't want to go through that. It can be really hard. So the one thing I'll say, I can't remember the text off the top of my head. We do provide template text that you can use. So it's like a template email that you can adapt to like a text message or a Facebook page that says basically, hey, I find this really awesome new tool, and it's to help us have these awesome conversations around the climate crisis and kind of find that kind of hope. If I was to talk about it, I would say about having the courageous conversations. It's like a safe space to have a courageous conversation about climate.
Yeah.
The big thing that we focus on, and the big thing that I would always suggest to focus on, is focus on the hope. So if you were to go on our website right now, one of the first lines that you would see is turn the defining crisis of our time into the defining adventure of our time. So I would really think about, if you were wanting to speak to whether it's your faith network or people outside of your faith network, what's the hope in someone joining you? So what would be that shared experience, and what do you hope the hope is when you come out of that experience?
Okay.
I hope that gives you some food for thought.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I'll mull it over. Thank you. I just, I feel when I showed a particular film, and I felt that people thought it was going to be some way of feel-good film, and I took them, I hadn't warned them, and I felt kind of bad that I brought out all these feelings in them at the end of it, and I sort of lured them into this thing that they weren't ready for, and I just would want people to know that, you know, they're going to have uncomfortable feelings.
And it's perfectly okay as well just to be honest and say that this is the first episode is very much, it's a hard hitter. When we say organise over a week, I would always say you should never leave a lot of time between episode 1 and 2, because sit down the bottom of the U can be quite hard. And also it's okay if someone's not in the space that they're ready to process that grief. There might be a lot going on in someone's life that maybe that kind of emotional processing and conversation isn't something that they're ready for. So it's perfectly okay just to be honest and say, look, this is the you, this is how we go down. We will come out with hope and action. But the first episode is where there is going to be, you know, some uncomfortable feelings, I would say, but also where the magic happens is the conversation after. So being able to have those courageous conversations, but also feeling like you're in a safe space where you can have them and be really open and honest about how you felt going through that experience.
Great. Thank you, Cecilia. Thanks. Jake.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. This is so my question is about hope. And this is very serendipitous because I just came off another call with a researcher from Cambridge talking about existential risks and underexplored climate risks and how bad things can get. And it was a super good discussion, but people asked the guy, so what concretely can we do? And he said, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't be here. It needs more research. I wanted to ask, when you about the messaging, and maybe I should just watch the materials to get a better idea, but you said it's about how bad things can get unless we step up and act. I just wanted to ask, is this a messaging around we can still turn things around, we can still save 1.5 degrees or whatever, or is it more like, guys, this is happening, whatever we do, but let's try and get through it together with the focus on the community and the facing up to it rather than, you know, making it not happen, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we are very much focused on switching to a new story. So in episode 2, for example, we explore what the old story is. So, you know, with farming, for example, what farming practices are happening currently that's massively exacerbating the climate crisis. But what we do is also explore what the new story can be. So just to use farming as an example, regenerative farming is one of the examples that we use and how much of an impact that can make. So it's not necessarily let's muddle through and make the best of it, but I appreciate why for a lot of people that's how it feels, that, you know, that's what we need to do. For us, it's trying to kind of say that it doesn't have to be the story that we're in. The story can change, and we all have the ability in a variety of different ways to be part of that change. So one thing that we don't try to do is have one specific call to action off the end, like the end of this, particularly because we're reaching the broad middle, we're trying to give a broad range of actions. So we try to give examples of, you know, how you might want to be involved in your workplace and changing workplace habits, looking at political systems and how you could change like from the top down, but also how you could change in your community, how you could change your village, you know, all of these different things to try and give this sort of sense of there is new stories that can emerge from what we're in, but it takes us coming together to do that. I hope that kind of clarifies a wee bit about where we sit with that.
Jake, I'm sensing there's perhaps a bit more you want to.
Well, so I guess you're focusing on what people can do rather than promising specific outcomes. You're not saying, hey, everyone, if we all do this, then it will be okay, because you can't promise that.
No, we're not saying it's all going to be rosy and we're all going to skip off into the sunset together and hold hands. What we are saying, though, is that we can change the story and we can mitigate what's happening. And it's about providing that clarity of how did we get here in the first place? Like, what is the story that's brought us here? But what is the new story that can emerge? And also, like, how can you get involved? So it's not necessarily saying it's all going to be okay if only we do this and this and this, but it's saying that there is a series of decisions and actions that have led us to this point, and we can change, like, we can change that story and change that narrative into something else. And the one thing that we kind of don't try to do is focus on that sort of blame and shame. So we're trying to kind of move to, you know, we're all caught up currently in this narrative, the story that's happening around the world, but we have a chance to kind of break free from that and change it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jake. A question from Jen now, and I'm going to come to you, Simon and Adam, in a minute, who can't unfortunately ask questions herself because of the space that she's in. Yeah, she's really asking, I guess, how have you been seeing conversations translate into action so far? And I know it's all very, very new.
Yeah, so we're seeing a variety of different things. First of all, one of the really interesting things that we're discovering, again, we're only 6 months old, so what we're seeing in the long term in terms of action, we're still to play out. One of the things that we're seeing is more than 50% of our groups are meeting a 4th time after going through the week together. And that 4th session is, we've gone through this experience, we've identified all these different actions, what can we actually do in our community, in our area? And that's really exciting because it's not something that we ask people to do, it's not part of the experience. So this is quite naturally happening. And that sort of sense of community and, you know, let's continue this conversation. Some people are choosing to set up WhatsApp groups or Signal or Telegram groups where they're kind of keeping in touch with people that have gone through the experience and kind of saying, like, what's happening next. We're also seeing in the workplace that we're seeing some organisations that are using the week as a means to kind of bring people and employees and leadership into that sort of exciting hope for the future within the climate crisis. A really interesting example would be Decathlon. I don't know if you know Decathlon, they're a multinational sportswear organisation. Yes, so you do know them. So they were really inspired by the week and are now rolling out the week across all countries that they operate in. So they have climate training that is kind of now part of the experience within their workplace, and the week is one of the options that colleagues can kind of like sign up to and say, like, I want to go through this as part of it. So that's been really exciting. Another example of how it's been used is we had a professor in Cologne who was really inspired by the week, and what she did was she offered the week as an extra credit to her students. One of the things we always say is, please don't make the week mandatory because of the emotional processing. We don't think that that's the right way that the week should be used. So she offered it as an extra credit, and the idea was that students can come back to her and say, you know, I am, you know, I've written an essay on how I felt going through this experience with my friends or my family or whoever it was. So I think we had more than 90 groups sign up and go through the experience, and we had students come and speaking to her and saying just how much it's impacted their lives and their decisions and how they want to make choices going forward. We have heard from someone who has actually got very heavily involved in activism as a result of the week, and really kind of said that that was the lighter for her, that kind of got that sort of fire in her belly to say, you know, it's not enough for me to look at personal changes. How can I look at kind of being part of that bigger movement? So we are seeing that it's kind of sparking really interesting actions and conversations in various different ways. And hopefully we can come back in a year or 2 years' time to talk about how we see those tipping points happening as well, because we're not quite there at the tipping points, but we're kind of seeing some really exciting things happening.
Right, thank you. Simon.
Thanks very much. Hello, Megan. My question's a bit similar to Cecilia's, but slightly different. Have you sort of got any wisdom or things you've learned from running the week to deal with the situation where although perhaps it's kind of designed to be like a group of people go through the same experience, you all sit down together, you watch a movie on the same level, you have a conversation, as it were, of everybody being very, very equal in that conversation. But at the same time, by the whole way it works, somebody is going to be the inviter, and somebody is therefore in the sort of situation of a bit like a kind of missionary for the whole project. And there's a risk then maybe that person is either needs to carry a lot of the burden of the conversation, or the other people anyway may feel that they're being led by the nose into the experience. And do you have any sort of wisdom about how to stop it having that sort of dynamic?
Yeah, so yeah, you are right that there is one person that ultimately organises the session. It is the way that it's designed, and we do try and deconstruct that as much as possible, but ultimately that's like the first step that someone can take. And you're right, because there's also a level of social capital that goes into that decision to, I'm going to organise the week, particularly if you're using it as a tool to organise with people who aren't already engaged in the movement. So, you know, it is to some extent that sort of social risk of, you know, am I going to go and have these conversations? I've not experienced the week before. What if it kind of goes awry? One of the things that we suggest a couple of things that we kind of suggest in the conversation guide to help try and minimize that is that we ask that nobody talks over anybody. We ask that the conversation doesn't delve into politics and debates. So it's not necessarily about, well, I think this government needs to be doing this. It's more about going through the experience and how you're feeling about the experience and having that conversation about it. And what happens after that is then where you can kind of get into the ins and outs of it. So we kind of encourage that. We also suggest that someone is a timekeeper and gives maybe like 2 to 3 minutes per person to speak. And we also suggest that it's not a round robin where everybody kind of has to chip in. It's just once you're finished speaking, the next person can come in and speak, and there's no pressure to speak either. It's not that, okay, it's you next, Simon, it's you next, Ray. It's just trying to create a space where when you're ready to speak, you can, and we try and give a bit of time. Obviously, we can't mitigate all of that, and there will likely be times that we'll come across groups where you've got one person that really likes the mic, or, you know, we have one person that kind of delves into the politics, but that's kind of how we lay out this conversation to try and help mitigate that. I hope that kind of answers your question and kind of gives an idea of the scene that we try to set before those conversations start.
Thank you, Simon. Adam.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Adam.
Okay, start again. Thank you, first of all. I find it always inspiring to see people like you who are doing whatever is most likely to take us from here to a there that is livable. I mean, precisely the fact that you and the week, this is in a way the most important thing to do now. I mean, that's why you're doing it, which is getting people into the conversation who are just like scared. And I can understand when you mentioned that it's this was started up by grief counsellors. I had a very big bereavement in my life and was involved with grief counsellors, and what you do get through to not just an afterlife but potentially a better life, and that's true of the climate transition too, moving from an individual focused society to one based on community, which is what we're created to. That's how humanity as animals and creatures have lived. So thank you. Also, you answered a previous question, which was which was Jen's, about what is happening. And what is happening is you're forming communities. You're actually creating communities in the process, which you said. 50% are carrying on. So that's also amazing. I suppose personally, I'm curious if it's possible to see the films before deciding who to share them with. Like which community in my life it's going to be best to start with. In a way, I'd like to do it with my loved ones, who I have taught. I mean, I know that other people in this group, because we did The Edge with Kim, and it's a big deal for lots of people about how within the group of people we love the most and share our lives with, we can't really talk about this stuff, or they don't want to listen to it. So but my question is, sorry for all the verbiage, is it possible to see the material before deciding who to share it with, or do you need to sign up and embark on the pathway from beginning to end?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm really sorry for your loss, and also, I'm really glad that you shared about seeing that, going down the bereavement and coming out the other side. Just to make a point about the community, you're absolutely right. It's one thing that we want to create. One thing that we don't want to do, though, is reinvent the wheel. We're not a movement. We're mobilizing people into the movement. So the end goal is not for people to be the weak enthusiasts, essentially, people to go on to join Extinction Rebellion, workplace initiatives, Parents for Future, all of these different organizations. So just to be clear as well, that we in no way want to take up space within the climate movement. We are simply want to guide people into those movements. And to answer your question about can you watch the films in advance? So yes, but the caveat is we have very, very little capacity, so we wouldn't be able to send out films to everybody that requests them. So what you can do is you can just register on a website as if you were organising a session. You say how many people that is going to watch the week. So you organise a group and you just say a group of one, and you can access the films. Once you've got an account with us, you can organise over and over again with as many people as you want. So you could say that the reason why I ask for one is just so that it helps us. If you say, I'm going to organise it with 50, we're like, wow, that's amazing. You're going to organise it with 50, but it's only just you. The other thing that I would say as well is the purpose of the week is to allow people to explore and sit with these emotions together. And so what we don't allow is binge watching. So once you've finished episode 1, it does lock automatically for 24 hours, and then you go on to episode 2 and go on to episode 3.
That's clever.
So it's just so that we don't have a group saying, let's do it in 5 hours today in the workplace. Doesn't give you the time, we don't think, to sit down and think about it.
You need the sedimentation.
Yeah. Nor do we want it to be over too long a time where that grief is too long that you're sitting with. Like you say, Cecilia, you had that group where we're like, no, I can't feel that again. So we kind of want to find that balance. So feel free to register for one on our website, try it out, but give yourself 3 consecutive nights or however many nights you want throughout the week to do that, and then you can kind of decide what you want to do from there.
Great. Thanks very much, Megan.
Thank you, Adam. Great question. And I've certainly been thinking about doing, organising a group amongst Heart community members. So maybe we can talk about that offline. Any other questions? Ray.
Oh, I think you're on mute as well, Ray.
Okay,
there we go.
That's better, isn't it? Yeah, my thoughts were running on a similar line to Simon about the scariness of having discussion groups where there is no necessarily expert counsellor or somebody along those lines who knows what denial is all about and so on. I'm one of a group which includes Liz, who was in our conversation but seems to be missing at the moment. We've had some carbon conversations in Hertford, and it's been, hi Liz, I'd love to know what Liz thinks about whether our conversations got us anywhere, but they were led by a psychologist, a climate psychologist, who is a member of the Climate Psychology Alliance, which might be something worth members here pursuing. But I feel one needs in these conversations somebody who thoroughly understands where conversations might go and the dangers, and of leaving people very distressed rather than consoled, shall we say. Would you like to say something about that, Megan? Thank you very much, by the way, and good luck to you.
Thank you. So a couple of things to say on that is, first of all, our films have been very, very carefully scripted, and we have done a lot of research in advance. So like I say, we launched in January of this year, but we've done multiple prototypes on the lead up to that. So we've tested, we've learned, we've adapted. So the final movies that you would see on our website is very much, we have scripted it and we do want it to have a lot of emotional processing and reckoning, but we have been very careful and deliberate about how we word things, about how we create this space at the end for the conversation. But on our website as well, we've done research and we've found a few different suggestions of where you can go to process grief if you're finding the emotions quite hard. So we do have signposting on our website to get that support for that emotional processing afterwards if you need to. So we're aware, particularly episode 2 and 3 is much more finding the hope. Episode 1 is the hard one, where you do need to sit with this uncomfortable realization of what's to come. So we do suggest, if you do need support, that there's a couple of, and I can't for the life of me remember who it is that we signpost off the top of my head, but we do have that on our website where we suggest that, you know, if you need the support, this is where you could potentially go to.
Great, thank you, Ray. Just got about 10 minutes left. Anybody else want to come in with a question? Okay, well, I'll ask another one then.
I think we have Ray as well, who's just popped his hand up.
Oh, go on, Ray.
Now Liz is back. Can I repose that question to her? She doesn't have to answer, but I regard Liz as a friend, and I've not had a chance to ask her where those carbon conversations that we had brought her to. Do you mind, Liz?
Oh, right. I'll tell you, I'll give you a ring and we'll talk about it. Yeah, okay. I'll give you a ring, because I'm sure no one here wants to listen to. I'll give you a ring.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is perhaps a bit more controversial. I would consider myself, in terms of stance to all of this, to be collapse aware. I'm an elder in the deep adaptation community, and so I suppose you know, whilst I'm incredibly grateful for this initiative and love what you do, I just love your take about kind of where the science that you include gets you in your films. And I will have a look at them, and then I may be able to answer my own question. But one of the big things that's happened over the many decades now is well-meaning people who aren't quite telling the truth about how bad it is. in order to not shock or send people into despair or whatever it is. And as you know, Professor Rupert Reed is very strong on the idea that that narrative, that 5 to midnight narrative, is actually now doing us a disservice, because it's kind of, and I worry less than perhaps some other people on this call about people processing their feelings. We should be feeling grief. So yeah, just anything you could say about, you know, how we have this diagram in Heart, which is called the 4 columns, and you know, there's a kind of column 1 which is not really engaged or even skeptical. Column 2 is business as usual but greener. Column 3 is emergency, and column 4 is collapse aware. That now, you know, pretty much no matter what we do, this particular civilization is finished. And it's now about adaptation and community resilience, as we've been saying. Yeah, just what are your thoughts about that?
So you're looking for my thoughts on the collapse aware, not the science in the films, or you're looking for how we use the science in the films? Like, just to clarify what your question is.
Yeah, well, either or both, whatever, you know, whatever you want to say. And of course, it's wonderful that you're a, you know, passionate advocate for the week. Of course you are, and that's quite right. But are you kind of, are you, how much has it been dialed down so as not to be so scary, I guess, is the question I'm asking.
Yeah, so just to clarify the science, all of our research and science on our films have been reviewed, peer reviewed by climate scientist and conservation scientist. And what I would say on that is, yes, we very much, episode 1 is focusing on the grief, like you say, like we should be grieving, but we also need to grieve to get to the other side. As you said, Adam, you kind of need to go down and process that in order to come out with any sense of that kind of hope. We are designed with a specific strategy in mind. So we are designed to engage the broad middle. So we're not telling the truth, but our films are scripted in a way that we want to reach a specific audience and support them to grieve, but come out ready and fire in their belly to kind of act with us, and how they use that from there, and how much more they go into deep adaptation or get involved with Extinction Rebellion, or, you know, get involved with other movements, is kind of like then all the different pathways are open to them. But in order for them to go into anything deeper, how do we bring them that step closer to that? So the week isn't the be all and end all, and there's so many amazing tools and methods and actions out there, and also the week might not be for everyone, and we recognize that. That's absolutely okay as well, but we really want the week to be a way that brings that broad middle the next step closer, where they can say, let's get involved in this movement and process more and research more and get further into it. But
yeah.
how do we ignite that fire in the belly with the broad middle, who are just like, that's a terrible thing I seen on the news, but I've got so much else in my life, I can't sit down and process it. So that's where we sit. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. So it's probably a good time to pause, unless anybody else has got anything else that they really want to say or ask. We will, obviously this has been recorded, it will go up on Heart's YouTube channel, and I'll send you a copy of that as well, Meghan. But you've been absolutely terrific, and I'm really, really grateful for you coming on and telling us all about it. Yeah, and it would be lovely to stay connected, especially perhaps once after we've done the group thing, once we've done the week. That would be really great. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. And also, I know that you say thank you to me for what I'm doing, but also the week is just a thing that exists online. If people aren't using it and bringing it to communities and networks and having these conversations. And beyond the week, if people aren't ready for action with fire in their belly, like it's just an abstract concept if we're not actually doing something about it. So it's together that we do something, and it's together that we see those tipping points happening. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing in Hertfordshire.
Thank you. Everybody unmute yourself and just say goodbye.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks again.
Bye, everyone.